Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Delmar Chabad Center, and we have a very special guest with us today, Mr. Andy Gelbman, who's the chief engineer of InternetWizards.com. Andy, welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you.
Now, we had you on before, and we talked about the good and the bad of the internet, and we wanted to just focus on one thing. There's so much to learn on the internet, probably infinite, so you'd need 10 lifetimes to read everything there. But in any case, something Jewish about Jewish genealogy, so tell us about that, Andy.
Well, the thing is that one of the amateur genealogy is a very popular hobby in this country, and one of the things that kind of confronts as someone who's trying to research Jewish genealogy right away is that you kind of run into a brick wall as soon as you get to the point wherever your people came to this country. It's pretty easy to trace, your parents, your grandparents, from when they were in this country. The records are all here. But it's getting back beyond that can prove to be a little difficult. And
from Europe, you mean?
From Europe, or even some of the older records in this country. I mean, before 1920, a lot of municipalities didn't keep records. So you have to get creative in finding out information. And the internet can be a great tool to do that. There's some general genealogy links that are definitely worth checking out. One is called FamilySearch.org. It's maintained by the Mormon Church, but in cooperation with the federal government. And one of the things that they've cataloged is Ellis Island, all of the entry records from Ellis Island. And if your ancestors came in through Ellis Island, as most of ours did, 50% of all Americans can trace themselves back to someone who came in through Ellis Island. You can actually search Ellis Island's records, find out the name, the date of entry, the ship they came in on. You can even get a photograph of the ship that your ancestors came here on. It's a really great resource. That's available at ellisisland.org. The other records you want to search is the Social Security Death Index. And that's also available at familysearch.org. These are all free resources. There's no charge for any of this. And you can put in somebody's name and what state they lived in, and you will get a record of when they got their Social Security card, what their Social Security number was, and the day they died, and where the last benefit was paid to. So you can make sure that it's the right person. And if you want to get a copy of their application for Social Security card, which would contain their address and parents' name, mother's maiden name, things like that, it's $10, and you can write to the Social Security Administration, and they will actually send you a photocopy of the application that they put in. Another good site, and this is managed locally, is called JewishData.com. This is a repository of photographs of tombstones. And Jewish tombstones, as you know, contain a lot of information: person's mother and father, Hebrew name, date of death on the Hebrew calendar, whether they were Kohen, Levi, or Yisrael, and sometimes even cause of death, names of other relatives. Especially in the 50s and 60s, a lot of people put the names of relatives who died in the Holocaust on their own tombstones because obviously victims of the Holocaust had no graves to call their own. So a Jewish tombstone could be a tremendous source of genealogical information. Once you've collected all of this material, you're going to want a place to organize it because you'll go out of your head trying to keep it on note cards. There's a piece of software you can get, again, from FamilySearch.org called PAF, which is Personal Ancestry File. It's in its 5th version. This is, again, produced by the Mormon Church, but it's made available free to anyone who wants a copy. And it can be customized for Jewish genealogy. It doesn't need to be Mormon. There's room to put in a Hebrew name, circumcision, bar mitzvah, all of that information, as well as whether you're Kohen, Levi, or Yisrael. And it can be very handy to put all this information in. Also, increasingly, the Jewish records from Eastern Europe are going online. The Jewish records.
How are they getting a hold of these things?
Well, a lot of these records are actually in the possession of Eastern European governments. For example, personally, I found a lot of information from the election records in Belarus, in the election of 1905. Because when you went to vote, you had to say who you were and who your father was. And my family lived in Grodno at that time. And I found my great-grandfather's voter registration card. and on it his father's name, and then I went and found his father's card, and then I found his father's name. So I actually got back into 2 more generations just in the voter registration records, and these were available online from the National Records Office in the modern country of Belarus. And the reason they're putting these things online largely is to improve relations with the West. They want to show that they've changed from the communist era. They're not the same kind of societies. They're more open, and they want to share this information. So they put this information on there, and it's available for free. And you can get a lot of information, especially if you know what country your people came here from. Another good resource for genealogy, you see genealogy.com, ancestry.com. There's a company called Heritage Quest, and you can interrogate their databases for free here at the Bethlehem Library. The town of Bethlehem has bought a subscription for anyone with a Bethlehem Library card can do it remote from their house. They just go to the Bethlehem Library website and they can log in with their library card. If you don't have a Bethlehem Library card, it's no problem. Just come to the Bethlehem Library and you can go to Heritage Quest, absolutely free, research your family history. JewishData.com, also for free from the Bethlehem Library. And these are excellent sources for Jewish genealogy. There's also the Jewish Gen website, which is Jewish Genealogy Society, which is now managed by the Jewish Museum in New York City. And they have a lot of information there, but it's not well organized. They're working on organizing it right now. But if you're willing to sift through it, there's a lot of useful information at jewishgen.com. And the Jewish Genealogical Society of New York, which is jgsny.com, also has a lot of good resources for researching your family's past. And another thing you might want to do is by going to a company like Heritage Quest or Ancestry.com is to see if someone else has already researched your family's history. I actually found my great-grandmother's entire family tree.
Really?
I had a cousin in Boston who had researched the blocks, who's my great-grandmother, and put the whole family tree up at Ancestry, and it was available as a free download. And that saved me a ton of work because I was able to incorporate, half of it was applicable to me. I was able to put it in my own work as well. And a program like Personal Ancestry Fund makes it very easy to cut and paste from one family tree to another, and also makes it easy to share. And what PAF does, which is also nice, is you can include photographs, sound bites, video, anything, any multimedia file. And that's especially good if you do have a recording, say of Grandpa telling a story. You can record that and save it as a digital image and put it in the electronic records that you have, because these are things that disappear when the person dies. You can't hear their voice again. And if you have that, or a lower tech solution would be to make a tape of it and include it with it. Photographs, try to get them cataloged, and a good tip is to write the names of the people on the back of the photograph. Because it's easy, and not just first names, first and last names, because sometimes 2 or 3 generations later you have these photographs and you're like, who is this person? You don't know. It's good if you write it down, maybe a little more information. This was so-and-so's wife or so-and-so's sister, just so we know who these people are. And if you digitize it, you just put a caption in it, put that information in with it as well. Is a good way to catalog this information. And part of the problem also in researching Jewish genealogy is after World War II, a lot of Jewish organizations destroyed their records, because during the war, what the Nazis would do is they would go to the synagogue, or they would go to the Jewish federations or whatever. They would seize their records, and now they knew who everybody was and where they were. And so after the war, it was a lot of organizations simply destroyed their records, so that couldn't happen again. And so that's actually a loss, but it can be reconstructed if you're willing to put in some time.
Let me one little question I have. What if you don't know exactly? Everybody has a changed name. Not everybody, but so many people, they're Chaimovich, some long name or something, and they just...
Well, my grandfather was Fabkrovich, and that became Farber. So
most people have that kind of these things.
And the thing is that what you can do is at Ellis Island, it will have the changed name as well. So if you look up Farber, you'll see that it was changed from
So they have both names.
Usually they'll have both names, especially at Ellis Island. They have a lot of that. Also, they have, if you do know what the name was changed from, you would use the name that as it appeared in America, researching American records. And then when you go to Europe, you'll want to use the name that it was before it was changed. And if you do know that information, it helps.
Sure.
But if you don't, you can start with the name as it appeared in this country. If you can get the Social Security records, you will usually find on there people who've written in what their name was originally.
Really?
And sometimes you'll find that. Also on tombstones, you'll often find when a name was changed, people will put both names on the tombstone.
They're old-fashioned.
The old name from Europe as well. So tombstones, again, become a very valuable source. If you know where people are buried, and if you can go visit the grave, it's not only good for your genealogy, it's also a mitzvah to go visit the grave. But if you can't, increasingly cemeteries are being photographed, and these tombstones are becoming important records. One thing you could do is that when you do go visit a grave, take a digital camera and photograph the tombstones. Even if you can't read Hebrew, photograph the tombstone, bring the image back, and you can usually find someone who can translate it for you. A local rabbi will probably be more than willing to help you out and figure out what this information is. There's usually a ton of information, especially on a tombstone. So that's a good place to look. Also, if you can find, there are actually discussion groups where you can put in a name. I'm looking for information about such and such a person. And you would be surprised that you get emails back from people. Yeah, I've got information. And sometimes it's not the same guy, and sometimes it is. I mean, I've discovered new cousins through doing this. And we were able to actually go back to 1852 on my family and 1750 for my wife. And beyond that, it gets a little fuzzy, but we were able to go back at least that far. If you can go back 5 generations, that's considered successful.
Like the 1800s, 1700s?
Yeah, for most people today, 5 generations would take you to the mid-1800s. You can get back further than that, that's even better, but...
People can, or, I mean, it's unheard of?
No, it's not unheard of. It's, like I say, if you can go back 5 generations, that's considered that you succeeded. You
did a good genealogy.
You did a good job.
But otherwise, some people, I guess if you link up with someone famous, I know that's how the rabbis, before the computers, they did that. If you can link up your family to a known, very big rabbinical person, then they would be, because those are known, that great person, he comes from the Rashi, such a great
Well, obviously,
rabbi.
the rabbinic families are very well documented. I mean, if you do trace yourself back to one of the great rabbinic families, then 90% of your work is done for you, because you've got all that information. If you're a mere mortal, then your work's a little harder. But if you spend some time, it took me 8 years to get back this far. But
really it took that much work?
Well, it wasn't every day. Obviously, this is a hobby thing. But you come across things. We found the family Bible, for example, and there was a lot of information recorded in that. We found some old albums, and somebody had just written, who got married and when people were born and when people were bar mitzvahed, and even who the shidduch was and things like this. And that's very useful information because, again, the more you put in there, the more of a story that it becomes, the more interesting it becomes for people who are reading it. And then when you're done with it, what you do is a lot of these programs will print it out for you, family trees and reports and information about everybody in the genealogy. And you end up with a book when you're done. There's 1,500 names in the book that I ended up with.
Really?
And we put those in binders and we sent them off as gifts to everyone in the family. And but it becomes an interesting record. And then what happens, unfortunately, if you can undertake this, what happens is you instantly become the family historian. And everyone sends you when they have a child and when they get married and when, everything that happens. But it's also a good way for the family to keep in touch now, because now there's a reason everyone wants everyone to know what's going on, and it brings people closer together. It's a terrific hobby.
And people make their own website of their family?
Some people do, yes. There's actually free web space available at most of the major, Heritage Quest I know gives away, and genealogy.com will give away web space.
Just to use it, let's get together.
Just to put out information about a family history, and people use it as to schedule reunions around, and again, you find very disparate groups of people. You wouldn't even think they were related. Turns out they are. an interesting thing about Jewish genealogy is you're having an increasing interest in it among even Gentiles, because there's a lot of Gentiles out there who do have connections to Jewish families, either through marriage or just that over the course of years. And so you're starting to see even the general genealogy sites develop more of an interest in Jewish records.
Well, you get this idea like Senator Kerry we just had, and Madeleine Albright. Where all
Well, Senator Kerry's grandfather was converted from Judaism to Catholicism, and so you go back 3 generations, and he's got Jewish ancestors.
The Christian all of a sudden digs up that they have some Jewish blood in them all of a sudden.
Well, obviously, Senator Kerry's an example. Madeleine Albright's another example. And again, you find that families you wouldn't even think of being related are related. The Bushes and the Clintons actually have a common ancestor in King Edward III of England. So, now, I don't know if you'll get back that far in your own research, but some of these, it's kind of interesting to see who's related to who. Howard Dean is also a distant cousin of George Bush.
Really?
Another little bit of irony in the American political scene. And then you find, families, you find relatives that you weren't even sure of. I mean, I have the head of Johnson & Johnson is Ronald Gelbman, and he's actually my 3rd cousin.
Really?
And we discovered that, quite accidentally. And the way we discovered it is my cousin, Peggy Meisels, was doing a genealogy of her family, and her husband, who was, my cousin. And what happened was we ended up discovering that we had all of these relatives all over the place, including a Gelbman family in Canada, who descends from a guy named Jeremiah Gelbman, who fought for the British during the American Revolution. They ended up in Canada. And I don't know if I'm related to Jeremiah Gelbman, but I know that I am related to Walter Gelbman, who's a Civil War veteran.
Really?
And his grandson, Jacob, went back to Europe to seek his fortune. And this was kind of interesting because when we were looking for my grandfather's citizenship papers, we couldn't find him. And so we were wondering, did he enter the country illegally? How did he get here? And what we discovered was that the reason there were no citizenship papers is he was a citizen from the day he was born, because his father was an American. He was a repatriating American coming from abroad when he came here at the age of 22 in 1921. And so there was no need for him to become a citizen. He was a citizen when he got here. And so that's also why we couldn't find my grandmother's citizenship papers, because when she married him, she became a citizen.
Yeah, it's interesting. Get all the history out.
So you get all these, and I wouldn't have known this except, and this is another thing that you should, leaving the internet aside for a minute, I got this information from my grandaunt, who was 97 when she told me this story.
Really?
And I went back and spoke to my father and my father's sister, and they said, oh, well, she doesn't know what she's talking about. She's so old.
Yeah.
But when I went and checked her out, it turns out, lo and behold, she was right.
Yeah.
I mean, she remembered very clearly and why this was. And, of course, because she was my grandfather's sister, she also knew that she never applied for citizenship, that she had it from the beginning. And she wasn't crazy. She wasn't senile. She was accurate. And I was able to actually find the papers that prove that it was exactly as she said. And this actually answered a lot of questions we were having trouble figuring out the answers to. So when you can talk, especially your older relatives, do it now, because obviously you have a limited amount of time to do this. And write everything down, tape record it even better, or if you have a video camera, videotape it, because that becomes a very important record for you, just hearing it right from the primary source and right from one of your relatives. And you can usually, and most people know who their grandparents are, so if you can talk to your grandparents, that already gets you back 3 more generations. Now you're back 6 generations, and that's already considered a successful genealogy.
Yeah, just like it's interesting. My father-in-law, blessed memory, he used to say, even talking to grandparents, you have really a history right there, because if once they say something, all right, they're 70, 80 years old, and they'll remember, oh, I remember my grandfather told me. Well, their grandfather was 50, 60 years.
Remember, you have good memories from when you're about 5.
Yeah.
So if you're 80, that's you're going back another 75 years.
Yeah.
So you take 80 plus 75, you're 150 years in the past already.
Yeah.
And so, there's no better source than your own grandparents for starting this. And again, the best time to do it is now. and you want to record this, because my grandfather used to tell a lot of stories about the old country and things like that. And my brother, fortunately, before my grandfather passed on, recorded all this and tape recorded it. And so we have my grandfather's voice telling these stories, and they can be preserved now. And we had them transcribed, and we, you know, obviously my children learn about them, and it's a beautiful thing to have, because this is not just any kind of a story. So it's also family history.
That's excellent over here. Yeah, you know, you don't even have the resources available, like you say, with even out the computer, the real people that are going to talk to you about the different things over here.
Yeah, no, it's, you can't beat you know, primary sources, which is obviously talking to human beings. And again, you know, especially your older relatives, there's no better time than right now to talk to them. And again, just take a tape recorder, take a video camera, and record all this information. And then you can enter it into a piece of software later. But you know, get it down, even if it's not something you're going to get to right away. Get this information put aside, because again, you're dealing with a clock here.
It's important for a Jewish person to do it. I mean, it's probably nice for every person to do it, but, you know, like we say in our prayers, you know, you're a child of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which the genealogy goes back, you know, 4,000 years. But, I mean, it's an important part of being Jewish. It's not like someone says, well, why am I a Boy Scout? Because, you know, I joined up, so who cares who your father is or not? You want to be a Boy Scout, be a Boy Scout. You know, what does it have to do with anything? But here, you know, you're Jewish, you know, which is a, you know, square one. You can't start without that. It's just what are your parents, what are your grandparents, and you're really linking back. I mean, whether you know it or not, I mean, nobody knows 4,000 years, so maybe some great rabbinical families.
Maybe them, but nobody else.
You know, that's what you're saying. I'm a Jewish person because going back all the way years. So really, genealogy is so important. It's just a major foundation stone.
And you'll
for
find
Judaism.
that you know, you'd be surprised who your ancestors are. I mean, I discovered several rabbis in the past, and some of whom are at least by marriage related to the Satmar dynasty. And so you find these you know, these very interesting people in your own past, and it becomes a spur to more research. I mean, you want to learn about, you know, where they lived and how they lived, and again, you just creates a deeper connection to the rest of the, you know, to Jewish history as a whole. And it's a great resource. You know, getting started, we've talked about a lot of different things. If folks would want to get some of this in a form that they can print out and read and get some ideas of where to get started, we've created a document. It's available for free at internetwizards.com. Just go to our homepage. You'll see a link for free internet guides. Click on that, and you'll see a PDF there for getting started in Jewish genealogy. Gives you some just advice, just how to get going, and how to just get started in this, even if you're starting at square one. And there's some good resources out there, many of which are free, and we'll point you in the right direction.
Oh, that's excellent over here. It's good. There's more of an interest. People are being picked up with genealogies. I mean, a long time ago they did with the roots with African Americans, but now maybe with a computer it becomes even easier.
Well, see, the thing is with roots, I mean, you know, that was a highly fictionalized version of one person's family history, and here you can really get to the, you know, to the real deal, and it's even, especially, you know, because it's your family, it's even more interesting than reading about somebody else's. As I say, a lot of people say, well, the records were destroyed and the names were changed, and that's going to make it impossible. That's really not true anymore, because the records are now being organized, and there's an impetus to organize them. And it's basically coming from three sectors. I mean, one, there's an increased interest in the Jewish community in its own past. Also, the Mormons have gotten federal money to catalog everybody's records, all the records that are in the possession of the United States, which include a lot of European records. I mean, during the war, we confiscated huge numbers of European records that, while the originals are being returned to Europe, have now been cataloged in the U.S. archives. And so what the Mormon Church is under federal contract to do is go in and take all this massive information and put it on the internet for free for people to see. So that's obviously going to be a big help. And then the third reason is that a lot of Gentiles are discovering that they do have Jewish roots, and they're interested in them. So there's obviously an organized effort to get all this information and make it available.
It's interesting that a person one wants to, you know, of course it's so important because a Jewish person, like I say, has to know the roots, but even for the new generations, maybe we're a little bit, you know, we're interested, but I just think even the newer people, the younger people, a lot of times they drift away, you know, being as a rabbi now, speaking as a rabbi, that, you know, people drift away from being Jewish because, well, who am I? Am I American, a person of the human race? You know, and just say they're
What's my
just
identity?
blob. And they don't really get it that, you know, this is who you are going back 4,000 years, and you're not just made out of a biological, technical machine or something. You know, you're just a blob from outer space. You have roots, and you have, you know, the genes inside of you that are coming all the way back for 4,000 years. And I just even think, I mean, just a simple idea. I mean, it's not, I want it simple, but I think it's profound on one hand, because if people would just have that recognition there, you know, you're not from, you know, people look at a young person, oh, here I am in the 21st century. Well, here you are, but, you know, it goes back 4,000 years. And
You
why don't
didn't
you
spring
think about
up
that?
ex nihilo, you know,
Yeah.
you come from someplace. And I know for my own self, and having actually done this now, and gone back hundreds of years, and you start to, you know, you go back generation after, and you can actually do this as sort of page back, you know, generation to generation, and you see, you know, that where your grandparents came from, and your great-grandparents, and your great-great-grandparents, and what they did and what they had to go through, and then you kind of learn about the times that they lived in, and you start to see that you don't exist in a vacuum, that you're part of a continuing chain. And you know, again, my grandfather was such a great resource because he would tell us, for example, how they would celebrate Shabbos when he was a boy, and a lot of the traditions we keep in our house come from that. Things that they would do on Passover, and things that they would do on Purim, and again, we